Hey y'all, this is David with Ham Radio. Today I want to do a special little video about my tabletop CW keys that are right over here. What I have is I have a camera, just off camera, that I'm going to film with while I do this monologue, and I'm going to go over the features of this key, why I decided to build them, and why they're currently no longer available, except on the second-hand market, and they trade for pretty significant dollars because of that. So let's get into this. This is called the Lady Meredith. This was the production key at the time that I was making my CW keys. This is a fully fleshed out, what you would call production key at the time, even though they were pretty well handmade from scratch. They started out with a 2.5 pound block of brass for the base. That's just a solid chunk of brass, as you can see, just enough mill work to clear it. As you can see, this one was made on 19 December of 2007. It was the last one I made, and I kept it for me. You can see there's even a clamp recessed into that pocket that clamps that cable to keep it from pulling out. Made the clamp from scratch. The only thing I didn't make was some of the screws and the bearings. Didn't make those, of course. But what you have inside of here, I'm going to get back to this now. You have a top plate, as you can see, and this top plate's bolted on through these side plates with these two sets of adjustment screws on the side. I'm going to try to keep this where it makes some kind of sense. Let me see if I can focus it a little better. There we go. There we are. All right. These side towers are insulated from the top and the base with plate insulators above and below. So these are the electrical conductive parts. Let me see. There we go. These are electrically conductive so that the contacts pass through this. There's actually a wire soldered to each of these bars on the bottom that passes through and makes the connection up electrically on the bottom of the key. The lever arms are made of aluminum, and there's a bunch of relief machining on the inside to reduce their mass so that the movement mass is minimized. The low mass of the key makes it move very easily and very fast. The distance from the end of the lever to the contact is the same from the center line. Maybe slightly longer on these at the end, but at the initial designing, that was the intention. Was the input length was the same movement as the contact closure length. These are the back screw is the contact adjustment screw, and it is set, and then this is the lock nut that locks it in place. This is the spring return screw. This screw is using magnets. There's a tiny little magnet set in the end of that screw that pushes on a magnet in the lever arm, so there's zero friction magnets. The threads on these screws are 72 threads per inch screws. That was done on purpose because I wanted the finest adjustment possible, and my lathe would not machine finer than 72 threads per inch without special modification at the time. So that was the threads I used. I had to hand grind threading tools because I couldn't buy commercial ones that had a sharp enough point to give me good threads. These two screws on the top with these lock nuts preload the bearings so that when you actually put the tension on the bearings, you take all of the lateral play out of the levers completely. You just add tension. These screw down through this top plate and put tension on the top of the bearings. The contacts are actually wired from the lever arm. There's a tiny little one strand of a piece of, I think, 14 gauge THHN wire. We took it apart, took one strand out of each of it, and it comes from the ground on the bottom up through a hole and then goes to the back of the contact on the lever arm, so it is physically wired back. It doesn't run the current through the bearings. But all of this was hand polished. Mine is made on a, sorry about that, mine's made on a CNC milling machine, so I was able to do this grid pattern on the front, the scallop sides like you see here. This was highly polished in the original days. There's some pictures I'm going to insert now from my old website that I salvaged from the Wayback Machine before it got took down, and so you can see what the keys look like when they were new. The other one is the original prototype, and to be honest, I like this one the best. That top plate on this one's made out of 304 stainless steel, and I jeweled it, as you can see. The lever arms are different. It's a lot lower profile key. I'm trying to get the focus right. There we go. It's a lot lower profile key, but it is as you can see, I used toolbox drawer lining and double-sided sticky tape to put the non-stick surface. The date on this one is September 30th of 2005. I dated them all on the bottom. This one says serial number 1. It's technically the prototype. It was the first one I ever made. And this key, it does have an issue. This lever arm has vertical play in it. Is it one of them does? No, it's this one. This one has a little vertical play in it. I can move it up and down slightly. The bearings are this one has dental drill bearings, and that was when I learned dental drill bearings are not the kind of bearings you want to use because they have a lot of play in them when they're cold. Dental drills turn ridiculous speeds. So once they start turning, they heat up and the play gets out of the bearings and it tightens up. I didn't think of that. So these bearings are actually not the right kind of bearing for this job. Plus, as you can see, there's no top tower to preload the tension. They're just sitting in there on the post, and I might have a spacer in there, a bushing that keeps them at the same plane. I don't even remember, to tell you the truth. But you can see the tiny wire in here. Let's see if I get the light right. You can see that little electrical ground that I've got in there that grounds the contacts. But this one was very plain. I was just proofing the concept, and it turned out to be one of my more favorite keys. But those are the two keys that sit on my workbench in the shack, or on the shack bench, if you want to call it that. Occasionally on field day, I'll get that serial number 1, and I've got a little Pelican hard waterproof box just for it, and I'll take it to field day and use it. Most years I take it, some years I don't. I made my own straight key as well. I don't get it out near as often, but that's the straight key I made. I made the straight key out of scrap brass. Every bit of it. As you can see, it was old bearing brass. I didn't even dress the bottom. But I polished, machined off and polished all the other surfaces. But this got ball bearings on it too. But this key works shockingly well. Of course, it has a low mass because of the distance to the spring, and the lever distance is a lot of leverage force, But like I said, I made it out of scraps, and so it turned out to what it is. And I'm reluctant now to update it, so because it is all original essentially. I didn't even write my name on it back then. I changed it here a while back to use the old Tentec style connector because we were using it with an old Argonaut 2, and I've got the adapter to plug it into modern radios as well. But yeah, I made all my own keys back in the day. And the reason I made my keys, because back in the original days, set this down, I wanted a March key. I loved his keys, and still do, just to tell you the truth. If I could land one of them, I'd probably get one of them today, one of the round ones, because those are beautiful CW keys. Works of art. They really are. He makes gorgeous keys. And I just wanted one of his really high-end keys with the magnetic springs and all of that. And the contacts in my key are gold-plated, so they're gold contacts, or brass with gold plating on them. And I just realized I had a machine shop. I just set out to make my own high-precision keys, and people got the word kind of got out, and people started wanting them. So I started a little waiting list, and I would build one a month or two a month if I had time. And I built them for 2 or 3 years. And like I said, I think there's 15 or 16 of them out in the world. There was one single lever key. I only made one, and it had a torsion spring ultimately that worked, and that worked beautifully once you got it adjusted. You had a big long piece of music wire and you moved a tension block up and down that wire to set the spring tension. The closer you got to the lever, the more spring resistance it had. The further out, the lighter it was. And I've seen some people work some ridiculous levels of code with my keys. 60, 80 word a minute CW was no problem once they got them adjusted. I've seen these keys adjusted so close that you couldn't see the lever move, and it would send CW. It wouldn't even click like it does when I use it. The key closure was so tight. They can be set that precise, especially with 72 threads per inch, because it only advances the screw 13 thousandths of an inch with a full revolution of the screw. So, you can get super precise contact settings that way. Of course, with me running 20 word CW, it's not really necessary, but it's nice to know I have it. But yeah, that's the reason I made my own keys, and that's the rundown on them. And if you have any more questions, leave it in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. So until next time, get on your radio and go make some contacts with it, all right? Maybe I'll work you in the field one day on one of them keys even. Until then, 73.